All right, everybody, welcome back to the arena. It is just me today, no MD. We have a special guest today. Her name is Brittany Richmond. Brittany is a former counselor turned youth mental health speaker. Not just any youth mental health speaker, guys. She's a rock star. Look up her name. You'll see all sorts of stuff. You see all the videos. She's doing big things. She speaks to thousands of students, primarily high school. Brittany can correct me if I'm wrong. Throughout the country, but of all the youth on mental health and anxiety. So, first of all, Brittany, thank you so much for being here.
Thank you for
Two,
having me.
who is Brittany Richmond?
Oh my God. Well, first of all, thank you for having me. Could you imagine if you thanked someone for being on a podcast and they said, "Thanks, I really didn't want to be here." Like, I did not.
I'd probably just cut the episode.
Or they say, "I am not happy to be here." Like, do people say anything else other than "I'm happy to be here"? Like,
No, usually it's that or like, oh, thank you so much, that kind of thing.
thank you.
Yeah.
So no, that's just funny because I always think that because it's always the same for every. I listen to podcasts all the same. I'm always like, what if someone said they hate it here? Like,
Actually, that would make for a great. I'd actually keep it. I take that back. I would
right?
keep that.
Like
That is good stuff.
honesty. Like tell us all the things. But oh my goodness. So what was the question about myself?
Who are you? Who is Brittany Richmond?
Well, extremely awkward with questions like that because I live with pretty severe high functioning anxiety, so non-directive questions make my brain go like 10,000 directions. So, because I'm always like, do you want to know my favorite color or my trauma? Like, what direction do you want to go? But so, who is Brittany? Wow, good question. Very philosophical question. She is. Well,
Well,
I'm
let
a.
me ask you this.
Okay,
I'm
ask
gonna.
me a
You
direct.
wanted a more pointed question.
Yes, I do.
Why was the fact that you said I live with severe high functioning anxiety the first thing that came out of your mouth?
Because I'm very upfront about the things that I live with so other people can understand why I am the way I am or have a better understanding of why I am the way I am. I think that's one of the things I talk about with high school students. What a nice little segue is how to talk about how we feel, and that the more we talk about how we feel, the less power these things have over us. So I've always been, not always, but in my adult life, I guess, like after years of counseling, therapy, all the things, I'm very upfront about the things that I struggle with. So, like, even if I'm out in a social environment and I'm starting to feel stressed, I'll tell people, like, I'm starting to feel stressed. Like, I probably should leave soon. I just like people to understand or know, just know. They don't have to understand, right? You don't have to understand. But I like you to know so they're not secretly thinking, like, why is Brittany being a bee? Or like, why is Brittany acting like she hates everybody or she's better than everybody? Because those are like the things that I've been told before based on my behavior in certain situations. So instead of having people assume things, I'm like, listen, my behavior is this way because like I feel like I'm clawing from the inside out. Like I have to go. And it's just something I'm very upfront about. And I don't want to make myself sound crazy to all the people listening, but I do those things too because it actually helps me feel better when I talk about these things out loud. And I don't want to put myself in situations that are uncomfortable or make other people uncomfortable. So again, I probably just made myself sound insane, but that's why we're here. Mental
That's
health.
why we're here, guys. Well, what prompted you to become a counselor, number one? Number two, what would you say in terms of what you talk about today? Would you have say you've learned from your schooling as to become a counselor relative to your life experiences?
Right. Okay. So I have a master's in behavioral psychology. So I've worked as a mental health professional in the school system for a long time. I did like elementary school, I've done middle school, high school, I've done um, adult transition for adults with special needs. I've done a lot of different things in the world of mental health in the education world. I went into the field of psychology specifically because I wanted to answer the question for me of why I am the way I am. Like, why are things so easy for other people, but so hard for me? That was like an obsessive question when I was younger. I would obsess over that question. Like, how can you do that? Like, how is that so easy for you? But like, I physically can't get through the door. Like those sorts of questions that I was like, why do humans behave the way they do? Why are some people like, and I can say this, I'm saying it about myself, I say it with love. Why am I a weirdo? Like, why are things just weird about me? And so that led me into the field, partially because that was not my first direction. I actually wanted to be a film director. I spent my entire young career, like in high school and all the things, trying to get into film school. And I finally did. I got into Columbia College in Chicago. It's a very prestigious film school in this country. And 2 weeks in, or a week or 2 weeks in, I dropped out because my anxiety was so bad. So I worked so hard for something my entire life, and then my entire life at that point. And then I dropped out because I couldn't take it, because like I physically couldn't get through the door. I couldn't stop crying every day. I couldn't get out of bed. Like, what was happening? And it wasn't that typical, like you go away to school and there's like an adjustment period. It was debilitating, like physically, mentally, emotionally debilitating. So, but when I got home, I was like, I feel so much better. And that's one of the things I work with, why I stepped into the field of speaking, because I was like, there's just got to be a better way to reach more teenagers at one time and be able to share my story. Because as a mental health professional, it's frowned upon and in some cases unethical, if you have a license, to talk about your own mental health struggles or those in your immediate circle. So I was like, there's just got to be a better way. So I wanted to share how I don't want it to get so bad for teenagers where they feel like their only like path is to retreat, like it was for me. And that was just the first of many points in my life where it was like, if I would have just opened my mouth, if I could have just said how I felt, if I could have just tried to explain to somebody what was going on, I could have taken some of this pressure off of me. And and I believe that young people so desperately want to talk about their mental health, they just don't know how. So that's why I stepped in. So I believe that conversation and connection is the key to moving out of this place of isolation. So
It's so interesting because I used to be, without really realizing at the time, very anxious. A lot of just rumination. You think about the different attachments. I was like an anxious attachment person to the max. So like I was always thinking, what should I say? Did I say the wrong thing? I would analyze every single text message that I sent and what I could have said differently, when I should send it. Did I send it too early? Did I send it too late?
right.
I mean, all the
I still do
things.
that sometimes.
And I thought it was just normal. I thought that's
Right.
just kind of what people did. And as I started to heal, which I think we're always healing, but as I really started to process my feelings, get a better understanding of who I was, like my anxiety has vanished. And it's interesting because I don't know why that's the case. Like I went from a very anxious person to like pretty anxiety free. I still get like nerves here and there,
Sure.
but like I'm very present. And someone asked me like, what's your superpower, man? I'm like, I don't know. I don't have any superpowers, but I would say one is my ability to be present. Like I am always here in the moment. And if I'm not, I can recognize it and recognize why, bring myself back pretty quickly. But it sounds like you went from maybe non-functioning anxiety to functioning anxiety, but the anxiety didn't go away, it sounds like. And
Right.
so how has your relationship with anxiety evolved throughout the years?
So it's interesting. I wrote a book. It's called Lies My Anxiety Has Told Me. And it's called, like, the tagline is going from suffering from to living with. And that's exactly what you just described, is I was in a place of suffering from this, and now I live with it. And I believe that the difference in that verbiage is control. And what I mean by that is when I was suffering from this, early on in my teens and in my 20s, I was convinced I was completely out of control. Like this was just my life. This was just something I've lived with. It was just going to take hold and it ruined my life forever, essentially. So like it's in control. That's the suffering from. The living with says, no, I'm in control. You are part of my life. You're not all of my life. And I'm actually in more control than I realize. I think the lies that anxiety tells us is that you're going to be stuck here in this place of isolation and no one's going to understand you. People will always judge you. There's so much shame and guilt with what you've experienced and what you've gone through. And you're just going to burden everybody if you open your mouth and talk about it. Those are all lies that things, mental health struggles tell us because they want to keep us in isolation, because isolation is where the bad things happen. Isolation is when we feel helpless and hopeless and we're just stuck in this dark place, and it has control. And how we take back control is we start to talk about how we feel. And again, because once we talk about it, the less power it has over us. So imagine just constantly doing this over and over. And I'm not talking necessarily about therapy, but that is something I believe in. I love therapy. Therapy's cool. We love therapy. Everybody needs therapy. Um, I'm serious. But is just even like having these conversations with ourselves, right? I'm sure we've all been in situations where when we've said something, we have that feeling of like, oh, I feel so much better that I've said that out loud. That's what I mean. Imagine
You're talking to a guy that struggled with that held in a secret for 26 years. So
well,
you can imagine the first,
exactly.
yeah.
100%. So imagine that feeling, but like micro feelings like that over and over when you keep opening your mouth about how you feel, and then you start to gain this sense of control and this relief, and you're like, okay, and then I believe we can take the next steps of learning coping skills and, things that are healthy and that serve us. Because in mental health, that's what we talk about. We talk about coping skills. We talk about all these things you should be doing. But the reality is we can't get there unless we open our mouth first, which I believe is the first step to help us move out of this place of isolation. And to your point earlier, I'm still in the thick of it. I tell people that all the time because young people are always like, oh, I hope to, how'd you cure your anxiety? Or I hope to be where you are. I'm like, girl, bruh, like, let me tell you, like, my life is a stressful, hot mess half the time. But it's just part of what I live with. You can't cure it. You can only manage it and live with it. And some people are very fortunate to manage it and live with it to a point where it doesn't affect them at all. But there are still aspects of my life that are very hard and very heavy, but I have the tools and the resources to move through that. And it's interesting because like your story, how you said like you don't really feel these feelings a whole lot anymore. And knowing your story is there's this, I get told all the time, and I'm wondering if you get told this too, because I hear it from a lot of people. It's like, oh, I wish I had your confidence. Confidence is like the big word, right? Confidence. And I'm like, it's not confidence though. It's acceptance. I have accepted that this is who I am and part of my life. And I'm sure you can relate to that feeling. And then I believe we become confident. I don't think we can get confident until we've accepted this, and acceptance is taking back control also. So
yeah, and I don't think confidence is universal either. Like people, right. I'm still insecure when it comes to my sexuality. Like I'm not. So you won't find me going to a gay. Like I've never been to a gay bar. There's a reason for that, because I'm insecure and I'm still working through those things.
Right.
But I do have confidence in who I am as an individual, and I think I have enough humility to say that I'm insecure when it comes to those things. And I think that's where a lot of people struggle, is they view any sort of falter or that I'm not like perfect in this part as like a failure or as something I should be ashamed of, when in reality I think there's a lot of strength and understanding that there's so much we don't know in life and there's so much work to be done. Mm-hmm. Where do you feel like your anxiety stemmed from?
Let's call my therapist. Hi, how much time do you have? I do believe that coming from the field of psychology, I understand that there's genetic links and components to all of this. So we could go as far back as to analyzing brain activity, blah, blah, blah. But I do believe in
even while you're in the womb. I heard that. Like
right.
If you have an anxious parent, like
yes, nature and nurture are a very real thing. Like that's a combination of the two, right? Our environment affects how we live, and so do our genetic material, essentially. So, I mean, just listen. I grew up in a different time. I'm almost 40, and that's not old. Don't get twisted. That's not what I mean. But how people parent today is different than how my parents parented me. I was very much in a generation of rub some dirt in it, fall down, don't come home till the streetlights come on, whatever. We didn't have cell phones. No one tracked us. There was none of this just environment of anxiousness that we've created, and fear and stress and worry. And that's kind of like an environment but this parenting is a pendulum, right? Like we see it with anything. We see it with anything at all. And once it gets too extreme on one end, it swings to the other, right? Like it's just, so we're just seeing the pendulum swinging, and that's just what's happening. But right now we have, so I also grew up, and now the world is very like, we're tracking you. Like, what are you doing? Don't do this. Like, let me help you. Let me solve your problems for you. Like, we have the other end of the extreme, right? So I think that I'm very grateful for the resilience that those experiences brought me, but knowing now and being older and seeing like understanding my parents a lot more and going to therapy and things like that. My parents were raised on the more extreme level of that, right? So where they didn't even, their parents never said I love you. Like that's not what you did then, right? So we're just seeing it's this trickle down effect, right? I'm not blaming my parents. Listen, where's Freud? I'll give him a call. We'll have a conversation about my mother, but no, my mother's awesome. But my mother is not a perfect person. So I think that there's just environments that were created that created situations like when you get yelled at when you're crying. You can create when you're upset as a kid and you feel scared and worried and stressed and you get yelled at, to stop crying, stop like that. Those things shape our brain. And listen, if you're that parent, I'm not saying you're doing things right or wrong. I'm just saying my environment was a little up and down. Okay. So there were moments where it was very stressful, but I think it created some codependence. I think it created wanting to constantly seek validation. I mean, when I first started dealing with my anxiety, especially in my early 20s, and went to college, I was dealing with it through binge drinking, binge eating, promiscuous behavior. I was doing the things that made me feel good in the moment, right? And what happens when that wears off is you start to feel bad and then you start to do the things that make you feel good. So like it was just this vicious cycle, but those things made me feel validated because, ooh, somebody cares about me, somebody likes me, people want to hang out with me. But in reality, I didn't care about any of that. That's not who I am. That's never been who I am. I want to stay on my couch binge watching Gilmore Girls with my cats. Like that's what I want to do. But I didn't because I was trying to fit in because, we could talk about, again, where's my therapist? I'll just pull my file. We'll put it out there for the podcast. People can read all the details. But seriously, I mean.
Which makes sense, though, when you say looking for a lot of validation. When you said that, when you mentioned that, like not hearing the words "I love you," it made me think of like, I wonder if that translates into a love language of like words of affirmation because it's something that wasn't received and wanting something that we need as human beings biologically. Was there ever like I don't say a rock bottom moment because for you like that, like kind of propel, like I can't do this anymore. I need to either get help. I need to talk about whatever it was. I need to make change in my life. Like, was there ever a moment for that for you? And if so, like when was that?
So I actually talk about this in my book and in one of my talks, but there was no rock bottom moment. There's sometimes people can be like, this is what I was wearing, what I was doing, what date it was, what the weather was. I smelled the donut from across the street or whatever. People always have this like rock bottom moment, but like my rock bottom was like a 10-year time frame. Like it was pretty much my entire 20s. That was like the worst decade of my life is what I tell people. And because I was just stuck in this vicious cycle. I mean, I went to counseling. I understood my diagnosis. I was in college in psychology. Like I was studying all these things, but I was so unself-aware of the destruction that I was creating in the lives of other people, including myself. I mean, do you ever look back? There are moments where I look back and I think I can see the things I've done. Like I'm watching a movie and I'm like, I want to punch myself in the throat. Like, what are you doing? And like shake myself and be like, this is literally not who you are. And if people knew, Matt, like some of this stuff is so hard. Like you can't make this up stuff. And stuff that I thought that made me cool or, just like whatever. Like if people knew certain things, like we love a good redemption story. And I truly think I'm not saying I am, but thank God for redemption. Thank God for things like authentic apologies. Thank God for, working to be 1% better every single day and having humility and admitting when you're wrong and accountability and ownership. Like those things are hard. So to your point about rock bottom, I could have chosen to stay in that place, right? Like of distress, just anxiety, depression, just like feeling like I'm failing, like this world of hurt, which is hard to do. It is hard to stay in a place of a victim mindset and just like hating life. Or I could do the work. I could figure out what works for me. I could be on this like journey of self-care, self-love, and like acceptance. And that's also hard to do because both these paths are never ending, right? They're just never ending. So it came down to choosing my hard, right? Like, which hard are you going to lean into? Which hard are you going to work towards? And I chose, the path towards healing, which you're correct, is a consistent path. There is no get to the end of this. It is work every day to be 1% better. So
Yeah, I was that was news to me because like I had this idea that once I come out, my life's good from here on out. Like my life's good, and obviously it's a euphoria. It was a period, like a month or so of just like pure bliss. Like I just was like, oh my God, this is wow. I mean the support that I got, the emotional release, like so much. But then it was like, all right, well now you got to go live. Like now you got to start living authentically. Like
now
you've
what?
accepted yourself. Like there's more and there's more and there's more and more layers. And so to your point, yeah, I don't think the healing ever ends. But you said something, I think about a movie if someone was watching you. And there was this great question that I saw on social media that I'd like to ask you if I can get it right. But it was basically like if there was a movie theater full of people watching your life unfold today, what would they be telling you to do? Like what would they be like, oh my God, like why aren't you going this way? Because I remember when I saw that, it smacked me in the face because I reflected and I'm like, people would be telling me to go start dating more men. Like that's just what it like came to my gut, my heart is like, oh my God, that's a really great question because it kind of just gave me the answer that I probably knew but didn't want to accept. So I'm curious, like, does anything arise when that question's posed to you?
It's interesting you ask that because I think when we watch movies in general, we're rooting for the hero, right? We love a good hero story. Like that's just like human nature. And we always think we know best, watching from, just like you said, they would be telling you to do that. They'd be like, Matt, wake up. Like, what are you doing? Right. And that's exactly, they would probably tell me to walk away. Walk away would probably be the consistent thing that would come out of their mouth. Like I can think of so many, which is unfortunate, so many instances that I should have walked away from. And people, places, things, jobs, late nights, like walk away. Just go home. Like go home. And that's probably what they would say. That's
in those moments, what do you think was keeping you from doing so? Like what was the resistance? Maybe even you knew in your mind that like I shouldn't do this, but your body was telling you otherwise, and you still felt compelled to stay. Like what do you think that was?
I think there have been a few times where I remember like even like the smallest part in my brain being like, you don't want to do this. Like this, you don't want to do this. But it's stupid phrases like YOLO and, no regrets and all these things that you're told when you're young just would reiterate over and over in my mind, and seeing that it was what everybody else does. Like, this is what you're supposed to do when you're young. This is what people do. Well, spoiler alert, it's not what everybody does, right? And all of that is a lie. And I almost created fantasies in my head because I saw other people or assumed other people were doing these things. Or like, I really enjoyed a challenge, which is really pathetic when I think about it and I say it out loud. And I'm definitely going to out myself on this one because it just was what it was. I remember being in undergrad at Western Illinois University and everybody liked the president of this one fraternity. Like they were like, oh yeah, that president. And I was like, I'm going to sleep with that president. Well, guess what? I did. And it was like a challenge. It was like, I want to be the one that said they did it. It was just so ridiculous. Like stuff like that, because I look back and I'm like, Jesus, like, was that really? And like, what is going on? But like, it made me feel like people were like, ooh, Brittany, like, oh, look at her. Like that it's like validation, like I said, which is so weird, Matt, because I am not somebody who thrives off of recognition. I get really uncomfortable with compliments. I get really uncomfortable with open-ended questions, and I don't know if it's like, I just like to help people. Like, I find so much joy in that. I've always done that. But for some reason, like, this stupid, I don't know if it was young ego or if it was insecurity or what it was, but like, I work really hard to keep that part of me at bay. And I do that by serving other people like as much as I can. Like, how can I help someone else level up? How can I help someone else get better? And like make it not about me, because it's never really been about me. When it was about me, it was destructive and unhealthy, which is not how I want to live my life.
So someone might naturally hear this conversation and think, wow, Brittany suffered from anxiety. Now she's living with it, but anxiety is still present. How in the world is Brittany a public speaker? Because the number one fear in the entire world, I think it's as feared or more feared than death, is public speaking.
Yeah.
And so, because it's crippling for a lot of people. And so, bridge that gap for us, if you will.
So I get asked this all the time. Like, literally, it's usually from an adult. Like, I get off stage and they're like, how can you do this? They're like, I don't even have anxiety and I would never do this. My husband is a teacher, and he's a teacher. So he's in front of people all day. I did an assembly at our former high school, which is where he teaches. And I was like, you should introduce me. He's like, I can't do that. I can't speak in front of these students. I'm like, you literally teach all of these students every day. He's like, not like this. And I'm like, oh my God. But I always tell people, I'm like, look, I have two answers for you. How can I do this? So the first answer is I have no idea. Like, I have no idea why this is a thing for me. But my second follow-up answer is always like, this is how I know I'm aligned with my purpose, because this isn't an area of my life that causes me anxiety. And in fact, I thrive on the feeling of serving these young people. And I think it has a lot to do with, I don't feel like they're looking at me. I feel like they're hearing me. And I think that that's powerful, because we can watch anybody do anything, but when you can really hear them, like, that can be transformational and life-changing. And when I make it about them and not about me, which is what I've been doing for years and years and years, you don't feel that. And that's what I tell public speakers just in general. I'm like, when we're so consumed with anxiety, we're about being on stage, we're very much making it about us. How can you make it about them? And then that transforms that anxiety into like excitement and the adrenaline and like the good nerves that we feel when we get on stage, because we all do. No one's immune to that. And so, yeah, it just becomes this enjoyable servant-based experience that I really like.
It's so interesting because I have a similar story in that public speaking 101 was my least favorite class in college. I took it in the morning, and I remember I went out and got super drunk the night before, so I was still kind of drunk. I was tipsy, and then it was less anxiety provoking, if you will. And when I was even in my prior life as a corporate banker, we would have to present deals about why we should invest in this company or lend money to them, whatever, and we had to speak in front of everybody. And it was my least favorite part of the job. I was just filled with nerves. And even afterwards, it didn't even like feel good. Like it wasn't aligned with me. But as I, for whatever reason, just stepped more, I think, into alignment with who I am, I started a podcast where I'm speaking, and I started doing comedy improv on stage, which is like even more fear-provoking to me than public speaking, because you don't know what you're going to say until the moment that conversation starts. And I think it's really just been living more and more alignment with who I am, because if I reflect back, there's always been a part of me, like really, and I suppressed it, I think, that is like wanted to be on stage. Like I remember thinking, but then also thinking like, oh, the theater kids aren't cool, and like I want to play sports, and that's cool, and so I just didn't go that direction. But the more and more I got older, even when I was still like pretty insecure, I was like, maybe I'll be an actor. Like I love the idea, and I was kind of like look at like I never was serious about it, but I go on Backstage, which is like this website where you can see gigs and things of that nature. So there's always been a part of me that's wanted to be on stage, and now I think I've gotten to the point where I've been able to marry this desire to be on stage, which is really I think to be seen, with helping other people. It's like healing me and it's healing them.
Mhm.
And so it's been really cool to like see that all kind of come together. When people ask me like how I do it, it's much the same as you. Like I really don't know. I just know that I don't feel anxious doing it. Obviously, like you said, there's nerves right beforehand,
Of course.
and then once you get going, it's like
We're in the flow.
it's you're in the flow. It's like it's a sport. I always compare speaking to a sport. Like you practice, you
100%.
rehearse during the
Yes.
week leading up to the event. Make sure you got kind of what you're gonna say, and then once you get in there, it's like it's game day. Like this is a reward for all of the hard work. Like this morning, I was in my bedroom rehearsing in front of a wall a talk that I'm doing next week. Did I want to be doing that? Not really. Like it's not the most enjoyable thing to speak to nobody. But I know what is enjoyable is being up there next week, feeling totally present because I know my stuff so that I can kind of improvise if I want to.
Yep.
I can feel the energy in the room and maybe make a comment here and there, and I don't have to worry about what's coming up next because I know my stuff. And so, long-winded way of answering, I really resonate with that because I never thought I'd be a public speaker. I never thought I would have a podcast. But I think the more that you live in alignment and authentically, you will start to find the things that give you energy.
Yes.
And that's where you run. Like if something gives you energy, you have to follow it. I don't care if it's not cool or it's pop. You have to run at it and see where it goes. It may go nowhere, but it may end up being something that's really purposeful for you. All that to say, you mentioned earlier this pendulum and how it kind of swings back and forth. I wonder if, and I've heard this on a podcast or two recently, this idea of we swung so much far to the other side where it's almost becoming, and I want to ask you specifically because you work with the youth, where it's becoming like cool to have anxiety, or it's like kind of like popular, like people like, it's a way almost, I don't want to say a victim mind, but it's a way to like kind of, like community in a sense. So I'm just curious, I think you kind of see where I'm going with that question. Like, have you seen that at all? What is your perspective on that? And it's not even specifically with anxiety, but just like a mental health diagnosis more broadly.
Yeah, we've definitely seen an uptick in the cases, right? Just in general. There's a lot of data out there, and I have a book here for any of your listeners if you've not read it. It's called The Anxious Generation by Jonathan Haidt. It's got amazing data that's worldwide, not just specific to the US. And there's a direct there's no doubt that we've seen an increase in clinically diagnosed anxiety and depression among young people. Clinically, that is by a healthcare professional, a mental health professional. So we've seen an increase in these things since we've seen screens come into the world. So not just social media or things like that, but there's a direct correlation with screens and increased anxiety and depression amongst young people. That also includes increased suicide ideation, self-harm, suicide, school shootings, things like that. We've seen a direct correlation, and they all connect back to isolation. Isolation, according to the Center for Disease Control, is the number one contributing factor to those things. And like I said before, I believe that those things keep us in isolation because that's where they hold the control. So we saw a recent bout of forced isolation through the pandemic, right? We were all forced into this place of physical isolation. And what I mean by that is we weren't going to school, places weren't going to work, things like that. So this younger generation is not only a part of the largest, most uncontrolled experiment ever done, which is screens, and now we've put them in isolation, forced isolation through a pandemic. And I say the word forced because we were told to, right? We were told to do that. Schools were shut down, things were like that. In social psychology, there's a theory called the need to belong theory. And what that theory basically says is that by human nature, we have a need to belong to a group, whether it's friends or social, that you can look it up. It's a very well-known theory in social psychology. What I believe and this is the mental health gospel according to Brittany, so everybody don't come for me, okay? If you disagree, I'd love to hear your disagreements, but I believe when we're in a critical neurological and psychological development phase of adolescence, right? The frontal lobe isn't fully developed. Young people don't have this ability to see big picture, all these things. And they're developing social and emotional skills in this critical time. And we put them in this place of isolation. They're automatically in a generation by data that suggests they're more anxious and more depressed. And then we're like, hey, they start following people on social media that are sharing their journey of being depressed or anxiety ridden. They not automatically, they assume that they are also feeling this way because, oh, they feel like I feel. I want to belong to that group. And then we see this like conformity happening. And then we see, and I hate comparing it to mass hysteria, but I say that in a sense so like your listeners will understand, where it's like if one person feels it, then all these other people are like, oh, me too. And then you start to see this group grow. And then it starts to get trendy. And then it starts to get traction. And then it's like, you know what I mean? So I think there are a ton of variables. I say all those things to say there are a ton of variables that are kind of contributing to this increase that we're seeing. And I say all that too to say is I think there's a misconception in definition and verbiage with young people right now. So sometimes I'll hear a young person say, oh, I can't do that. It's causing me anxiety. And then I like to correct them and say, well, are you actually just stressed? Because stress and anxiety are normal emotions, right? This is a stressful event. It doesn't mean it's causing you anxiety. So I think that there's a definition problem that we're seeing. There's a lack of education problem that we're seeing with mental health. I do believe that we quite possibly see an uptick because of this sense of belonging. Like young people so desperately want to belong, especially in a time period a few years ago where we separated everybody. So all they had was social media. And then it's just like listening to a song. You listen to a sad song, you feel sad. Well, if you surround yourself with people who are feeling a certain way, you start to take on those emotions, that mindset, right? Just like if they say, poor dad, rich dad, you want to be rich, you hang out with rich people. You want to be poor, you hang out with poor people. It's a mindset. It's a conformity that occurs. It's a natural human phenomenon, okay? That just happens, right? And so there are choices to be made there. So I got a little like psychological on you, but I do think there's variables that come into play. I think there's a lack of definition that needs to occur. Like there's education that needs to occur in the definitions of like stress, worry, anxiety, fear, depression. I think and sadness, like we seem to lump all of these things and be like, oh, you have anxiety, you have depression. It's like, well, actually there are things that need to be said. I do believe that young people are more likely to conform to each other. They want to find where they belong. They want to find their group. And I think that contributes to the increase. I think screens contribute to the increase. I think that we've created this world that they're living in as adults, because we didn't have screens. So it's just a lot of variables. There's a lot of variables. I'm curious.
Yeah. Well, I was going to, when someone says like, oh, it's giving me anxiety, like it may actually just be discomfort.
Right.
And like those are two different things. And that was going to kind of go back to something I was thinking about originally when you mentioned about the importance of helping people understand, of just like sharing how they feel. How do you help people to understand how to do that? Because to your point, I think a lot of us lack the emotional vocabulary. And so it's just everything is giving me anxiety. But like you said, there's a spectrum of emotions, and if you've never been taught at a young age how to express yourself, to even know what you're feeling, like how do you help them do that?
I think what's interesting is that, and again, I'm going to get a little psychological on you, that when we were younger, we played a lot with toys. We played a lot with things, we build out play scenarios. Play as a child is so critical because it helps us with exactly that. And now we live in a world where we're like, oh, here, watch this show, put on a screen, do this, get on your phone. We are seeing a decrease in emotional and social intelligence in young people and the ability to deal with confrontation or understand and emotionally regulate because they don't understand these emotions and can't put words to them. So we're missing this play factor that helps, young people work through those things. But took a few notes. Pictures are really great. I often ask young people to describe how they're feeling in a picture. I'm like, and they don't necessarily have to draw it, but I'm like, how would you describe it? I remember this one time a young person said, because she was feeling very stressed in the moment and she was kind of like physically agitated. And I was like, how are you feeling? And she's like, I don't know. You get that answer a lot, right? Like, I don't know. I'm just feeling this way. And it's like, well, if you had to like describe it in a picture, what would it look like? And she said, it's like a scary monster is under my skin and they have really long claws and they're trying to scrape out of it. And I was like, perfect. Like, thank you. Like that, then we can like not only understand it, but we can like feel that, we can better understand that emotion. And it's like, okay, now we know how to regulate. But I think non-directive questions, as much as I love directive questions, non-directive questions for young people are so much more effective than directive questions. And this is one of the things they talk about is we have to give them the ability, we have to create and hold the space, right? We have to create the space for them to talk. We see young people come home and it's like, how was school? Fine. That was a directive question.
Young people and men. Men don't ask a man how he feels. Like,
but that's what I'm saying. Like, that's a directive question. You asked how school was. School is fine. Door closed. Any opportunity for conversation now it's just closed. The door is closed. But I often use like in counseling, it's called curious questions. It's meant to draw information. And there's three words that I share with young people, and it's tell me more. And it's just an opportunity for people to share more. You're not asking them specifically what it is, and repeating that phrase over and over. So for example, a student once told me, I don't like my job. And I was like, oh, okay. Like, that's weird. And I'm like, okay. But I started utilizing tell me more. And then she started diving a little bit deeper. She'd be like, well, it's because like I have to work third shift or second shift after school. So I literally go to school and then I go to work till 11 o'clock at night. And then I'm like, well, tell me more. And she's like, well, because of that, my grades are slipping. I don't have like all this time to like do my homework. And I'm a straight A student. And I'm really stressed. And I'm like, well, tell me more. And we just kept pulling it away. And she kept sharing. And that's the thing too. We don't want to stop the share. We want to keep the share going. And tell me more just also shows this person like, I'm interested. I'm not trying to solve the problem. I'm not trying to, provide a solution. All I'm doing is trying to share and create the space. And we actually got down to the root, and she shared with me that she's like a couple months ago, her dad up and left, like just up and left. And she took this job to help her mom out, like financially. So she didn't not like the job. That actually wasn't the issue. The issue was much deeper. So we started with a high level fun fact of like, I don't like my job. We got through down to what was really bothering her. And that's the power of curious questions like tell me more. It opens a door. It's an opportunity to create and hold space for someone to unburden themselves of how they feel. Thus, start to take the power back. So curious questions like tell me more are just so critical. And listen, the interesting thing about sharing with people, like talk about how you feel, that also implies that we need the active listener. We need the person to listen. And tell me more is such a powerful tool for people who don't know how to solve the problem. They don't know how to fix it. I mean, I had a student come up to me once who had lost their friend to suicide a few years before. And he said, I knew something was wrong. I knew he was hurting. I just didn't know what to do. Well, welcome to being a human being. And I don't say that unsensitively. What I'm saying is the research, there is data that literally says if we saw someone like with a car broken down on the side of the road, we want to help them when we drive by, but how many people actually stop? We don't. We typically don't. And don't beat yourself up by that. It's just the human condition. We want to help so badly, but if we don't know how to, we just don't. We just let the problem sit. And that's the same if someone drops their books in the hallway or whatever it is. You see someone in need, you initially want to help, but we don't for many reasons. And one of them is we don't know how to fix it or don't know how to solve the problem. So when we see someone struggling with their mental health, we can see it. A lot of times we can see it. Sometimes we can't, right? Sometimes we can't, but sometimes we can. Behavior changes, how they carry themselves, how they're acting, all these things. We can sense it, especially if you know that person really well. But we oftentimes, not all the time, we oftentimes don't try and reach out and don't try help because we don't know what to do. We don't know how to fix it. So take the pressure off of yourself and just create the space for them to start to take their control back.
Yeah, I think it also reminded me of something which is that I like to share in one of my programs, which is like helping other people is a win-win scenario, meaning the person helping the other person feels good about themselves. Simple as that. It feels good to help other people. And so sometimes I feel like the best thing you can do, maybe this is more for men, is to like ask them for something. Like people like to have a sense of utility. So it could be something very simple, but when people feel like they matter, they have a reason to be here. Like sometimes the best thing you can also do for someone is just ask them for like a small favor, because that makes them feel good, you know? And so I think that's kind of another solution or potential solution. It doesn't work all the time depending on the scenario and what people are going through. But to wrap this up, Brittany, I've got one last question for you. Ask all our guests. What in life, this you can answer this however you want, but what in life are you most proud of?
Oh God. Such a I'm like, oh, what am I most proud of? There's just so many things. Pride is probably not the right word. I think gratitude is probably the word for me, like the thing that I'm most grateful for, not necessarily proud of. But the thing I'm most grateful for is forgiveness. I think that's probably the thing that I'm most grateful for in my life. And that's just not just for me, but me having the ability to forgive other people, you know, and forgive myself. Like, I think forgiveness is one of the most powerful tools that we have as human beings. And I think it's healthy for everyone all around and can change lives. Whether you're forgiving someone, it can change their life, or, you know, you're forgiving yourself, or when you forgive someone, it does transform you too. Like there's so much power in forgiveness. And whether that's on a spiritual level, like if you're listening and you have a relationship with the Lord, or if it's within a marriage, with friends, with your family, with yourself, or a stranger on the street, like, I'm sorry, like the authentic apology and forgiveness is extremely powerful, and I'm grateful for it.
Yeah, a lot of people say like healing heals the forgiver. I mean, you're releasing that like burden of resentment or whatever it might you be holding. Brittany Richmond, everybody. Brittany, thank you so much for coming on.